This is Faisal Khan for Lights Out, proudly sponsored by Spartans Law, and this is podcast 54 of the Lights Out Boxing Podcast. And today with me I've got a special guest, fellow Lutonian, undefeated professional boxer, Ali Malik. Ali Malik.
Assalamu alaikum, Faisal.
Wa alaikum salam. How you doing, brother?
Alhamdulillah, bro. I'm okay. Thank you for asking. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you for asking. Just trying to get over some of the action we got to see on the weekend in the boxing world. Before we get started with today's podcast, just wanted to remind viewers out there, if they can, please make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell for more Lights Out boxing content. Check us out on all the social media platforms. Links are below in the description. And to listen to this podcast on all the audio platforms, links again are below in the description. But most importantly, make sure you give Ali Malik a follow on social media. We'll be sharing his social media links below in the description of this podcast. Ali, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Faisal, man. I appreciate it. Thank
Listen,
you,
bro, it's always good to have a fellow Lutonian here.
That's it, yeah.
You Arsenal fan or United fan?
Well, I was an Arsenal fan, but I no longer keep up with it.
Right, okay. Well, as long as you're not a United fan, you're more than welcome here. Obviously, there's quite a bit to discuss. You know, we had two big world title fights on the weekend. We'll start off with what went down in Cardiff. For me, I'm going to sum it up with probably the knockout of the year, as Joe Cordina become the new world champion by knocking out Kenichi Ogawa. He's now the IBF super featherweight champion. Right. You're a boxer. Just sum up that knockout for me.
Mind-blowing, absolutely mind-blowing to come away from that fight by winning by knockout, of course, and at that kind of stage, at a world level stage, is just phenomenal. It's just a dream come true for any boxer, and for Joe Cordina, obviously, I don't know him on a personal level, but what an achievement that is, and he should be super proud of himself.
I mean, there's a lot of pressure on Joe Cordina going into the fight, being the home fighter. A lot of people are saying, can he do what the likes of the Joe Calzaghes have done? Because that's a hard enough fight to replace, being a fellow, both of them being fellow Welshmen. Joe Calzaghe had a tremendous career, but this guy, the occasion never got to him. He just went in and done what he had to do, didn't he?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And the way that Joe just timed that shot, it was amazing. Like, you see the little flinch, and he just distracted his opponent, and all that right hand that came through was, nothing but perfect. So, it's a dream for anyone to.
He planted his feet so well, and to do that in the second round of a world title fight says a lot about Joe Cordina. Obviously, watching the build up to the fight, as I just mentioned before, people were saying, can he do what the likes of the Joe Calzaghes have done? But from what you've seen of him, he's still fairly young. He's not had more than 20 fights. He's now a world champion. How far do you think Joe Cordina is capable of going?
I honestly think that Joe probably has the potential to become undisputed in that weight category. Joe's strong, obviously, as everyone saw, and he's super, super technical. I've seen some of his sparring videos. I know some of the people that have sparred him, and they said that he's like hot fire. Honestly, the guy is just untouchable when it comes to his movement and his boxing skills. They're tremendous. So from what we've seen already, from that knockout and stuff, I think he's only going to get better. And like you said, he is still young. He's probably still got a lot more to achieve, and he still probably wants to go for all the rest of the belts within that division. And I think he's only what 13-0 now, 14-0.
I think it's 15 or 16
15 or 16, and you know what? That's still fairly early in his career. A lot of the fighters can't get a world title shot up until their 20th or 30th fight, and he's been given that platform, and he's absolutely smashed it. He's obviously gone and lived up to the expectation, and like you said, having that kind of comparison to the likes of Joe Calzaghe, it is quite pressurizing to live up to that kind of name. But Joe obviously went out there and done the business.
One of the things that I really like about Joe Cordina is not only is he promoted by Eddie Hearn, but he's also coming from one of the best stables in boxing right now, coached by Tony Sims. And you look at that gym, you got Conor Benn, Felix Cash, John Ryder. You got some really, really good fighters coming out of that gym. How much credit have you got to give Tony Sims? You know boxing well enough. Tony Sims has got a great reputation. How much credit does he have to take as well for what he's doing with these next proper fighters, including the likes of the Conor Benns and the Felix Cashes, because they're going to new levels now?
Yeah, no, of course, absolutely. And I think, like you said, he's got a very strong stable, and he's put in some serious time and work into these up-and-coming prospects and these up-and-coming boxers. Of course, these guys, they've been to the Olympic stage, obviously, Joe Cordina, these guys, they're all GB boys. Conor Benn, on the other hand, was someone that's been developed from his very first fight all the way up, and credit to him, because he's taken people, the likes of Conor Ben, and developed them into the monsters, the beasts that they are today. And so it's one of those things. I think it works hand in hand. Some people say it's the boxer that makes a coach, and some people say it's the coach that makes the boxer. I honestly believe it's a bit of both, because of course, a boxer in his own right has his own talent to go forward and has to put in that willpower. It doesn't come, you don't have that kind of fame or that kind of reputation just by sitting down and having a good coach. So you got to put your own effort in, but at the same time, I think without a coach, without the right mentoring, without the right the right skills and right training, it's very difficult to reach that top level. So yeah, credit to Tony also.
People are now going to say, what's next for Joe Cordina? And for me, there's only one fight that stands out, and that's Shakur Stevenson. Now, when I talk about boxing and we speak about the next crop of fighters, I honestly believe Shakur Stevenson for me is going to be one of probably the best fighter in the world. Maybe not now. He is still a world champion. Mm-hmm. He's still fairly young, but I think in the next 2 or 3 years, this kid is going to be a huge star. Mm-hmm. That's a fight people want to see. We'd love to see Shakur Stevenson come to the UK. Firstly, your thoughts on Shakur Stevenson, and is that fight the best possibility for those two next?
Yeah, I think to your first question as to what I think of Shakur Stevenson, again, the guy's like he's a hot pepper, isn't he? When he's in there, in terms of his boxing ability, he is absolutely tremendous. His previous fight, who was he up against? Oscar Valdez. So again, that fight there, just a pure boxing masterclass. He's really, really schooled him, and he said it also, didn't he? He said that I'm not going to knock him out. I'm just going to toy with him the full 12 rounds. And that's exactly what he did. He just boxed him the entire 12 rounds, gave him a full-on boxing lesson. So yeah, Shakur Stevenson's skills are amazing. Again, someone that I tune into regularly, and I think that fight there for Joe Cordina is probably going to be the ultimate fight. So if for that weight category, I think everyone would want to see that kind of fight. Yeah.
It's sort of like the ultimate test as well when you think about it, because as you mentioned, he beat Oscar Valdez, but he also beat Jamel Herring before that. So he's got a lot of experience in these big fights. You know what I think of Shakur Stevenson? Yeah. And don't get me wrong, the guy that turned up to fight Joe Cordina last night, it's unfortunate to him for what happened. Mm-hmm. I'm pretty sure he would have liked a better outcome, but he didn't. But let's just say that is the next fight that gets made. How does Joe Cordina beat Shakur Stevenson, a guy that is tipped to become one of the next big faces in boxing, a guy that is going through the biggest names in that division one by one?
Well, to be honest with you, I think Joe just needs to turn up the same way he turned up yesterday. I read somewhere, I think it was on Facebook, that Joe needs to turn up as the best version of himself and be absolutely perfect for the night. And last night is exactly that. He just turned up and he was perfect. So, of course, Shakur's going to bring the A game also. No one's going to come to a world title fight and not want to win and, bring the A game. But at the same time, I think as, a fellow British citizen, obviously I'd be backing Joe Cordina and, I'd be rooting for him. And in terms of skills and stuff, I think they're both neck and neck. They both got the skills to pay the bills. So, yeah, I think that'd be an awesome fight.
There's another fighter in that division as well. Another fellow Brit, Zelfa Barrett, who was on the same card last night, won the European title. A very, very good fighter. Massively improved. I mean, I remember a few years ago when he lost to Ronnie Clark at York Hall in 2018, and I wouldn't say his career went downhill, but it didn't work out with Frank Warren, and he signed with Eddie Hearn and Matchroom. I believe that was his 4th fight with Eddie Hearn. He's now a European champion. Obviously, you've been in the sport for a while. Next, people will say first it should be British, then European, then world level. Now he's a European champion. Do you think it makes sense maybe to sort of put him in with Joe Cordina next?
Domestically, yeah. You know what? You're absolutely right. I think domestically it is a good look. I mean, everyone wants to know who the best in Britain is before we probably want to look at who the best in the world is. Like for me being a British boxer, that's something that I'd like to see also. Definitely that would be a fight. That would be a good challenge for Joe Cordina. But yeah, again, it's one of those things that if Joe turns up the same way he turned up yesterday, I think it'll just be a level too much for him, for Zelfa. But at the same time, there's the likes of, I've trained with, people like Yusuf Kumari that are also that same division. And Yusuf, he really brings that A game, and he comes to fight, and he's always an entertaining fight. His slogan is, are you not entertained? And, he's one of those guys that does turn up, he brings the heat, and he's got amazing skills. I've seen him in the gym sparring, I've seen him, on the pads and on the bags, and the guy's he's just tremendous also. So he really brings that domestic level, I think, for the rest of that division, also, I think he's in the mix with those names also.
Yeah, it's exciting super featherweight British domestic-wise. I believe Kid Galahad is also stepping up in that division.
Yep.
You've got Archie Sharp, who's another good fighter. I'm a massive fan of Archie Sharp. So there are potentially some big fights out there to be made. Let's move on now, because obviously the main focal point of the weekend was the undisputed clash in Australia between
Right.
Devin Haney and George Kambosos Jr. for the undisputed lightweight championship of the world.
Yep.
I watched the fight very late in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't get easy watching these fights late morning, especially when you're 30 plus. But listen, that's what you do for the love of boxing. Devin Haney come out on top. He is now the 8th man to become the 8th fighter to hold all the belts in the 4-belt era. Devin Haney won by unanimous decision last night by beating George Kambosos Jr. The fight for me never lived up to expectation.
Okay.
Because I just felt that Devin Haney was on another level last night.
Mm-hmm.
That's no disrespect to George Kambosos Jr. I think George Kambosos has got he's got the heart of a lion. We saw that against Teofimo Lopez when even I didn't give him a chance of beating Teofimo Lopez. But in the end, Haney walks away with all the belts. What did you make of the fight last night? His performance.
So
as well?
similar to yourself, I'm at that stage now where I do have the love for the boxing, but I wasn't able to stay awake to watch that fight purely because of the fact that I've got a lot going on in terms of my own family and stuff. So I got up in the morning and I watched some of the highlights. And my prediction obviously was for Haney to come away from that fight on top, just box long and use his jab. And, it came to light that was the reason his jab won him the fight. And again, Haney, credit given where credit due, a tremendous boxer. I think he tries to emulate, the likes of Floyd Mayweather. And he does that quite well. Kambosos, I'm also a massive Kambosos fan. His personality, his persona, his viciousness, the guy's just absolutely ferocious. And, I thought at the time, prior to the fight, I thought, this might be one of those fights where if he is able to get on the inside, he's going to give Haney some trouble. But of course, Haney, being as skillful as he is, he was able to keep it long, keep jabbing him, keep moving, and keep busy and just put on a boxing masterclass. So, yeah, again, another fight that might not have lived up to expectations for a lot of the people, but in terms of a boxing masterclass, I think Devin Haney just done exactly that, put on a boxing show. So,
I think one of the main points we've got to take out of the fight between those two is the fact that Haney's travelled all the way to Australia, which is Kambosos' backyard.
Yep.
There's question marks over whether his father will be present due to visa issues related here. Kambosos was playing a lot of mind games. He come in overweight as well the day before the fight. At the weigh-in. He was very confident in the build up to the fight in terms of the press conferences and the interviews. But Haney sort of just all put those little issues to a side and went in there and did put the performance on that he did. I think we need to look at that and think, this guy is easily in the pound for pound list right now because of. To go to someone else's backyard, I'm not just talking like go to America, he's gone all the way to Australia. How often do you see boxing shows in Australia? For the undisputed fight, he knows that the judges might be against him, but he's just gone in there and he's put on an absolute masterclass of a performance. Now, the build-up to the fight, I've spoken to a lot of people about it, and they say that we find Haney boring. But it's a results business.
Yep.
Do you think that Haney was sort of now look to maybe perhaps change his ways, think he might become a bit more of an exciting fighter? Because now there's going to be some big challenges, the likes of the Lomachenkos. Will he want to move up to super lightweight? There's Ryan Garcia, Gervonta Davis. Yeah. Do you think that style that he has is going to be the style he carries out through the rest of his career? Would you like to see more of a meaner side to him in the ring?
I think from a fan perspective, everyone would want to see someone that's able to stand there toe-to-toe and, put on a bit more of a entertaining fight where, you're throwing a lot bigger punches. But here's the thing, Faisal, and, being in the sport, it's all about hitting and not getting hit. And if that means that you have to keep it long and make sure no one comes near you, of course, because you don't want your brains punched out and, taking unnecessary punishment throughout 12 rounds, if you have to keep it long and you have to keep it boring, then you have to do that just to ensure that you get the win. And I think now, more than anything else, when you're at that level, you have to be careful, because when you're in there with the likes of Tank, when you're in there with the likes of some of the other names that you mentioned, Lomachenko and Teofimo, it's just so crucial. You saw it last night. Cordina put someone away within 2 rounds, and it's a world title fight. I don't think any of these guys that are up there would want to be put away that early. Of course, you'd want to be able to battle maybe into the later rounds and, put on a bit more of a show. But Haney, I personally don't think he's going to go away from that and try and become someone that he's not. He's managed to get this far by using the skills that he's got, and I think he's going to continue to do so. Whether people find it boring or not, at the end of the day, he's doing what he needs to get that win, to get that W underneath his belt, and he's got the resume. The resume speaks for itself. He's been there, with some of the likes of what's his name, Jorge, the lightweight prospect, no, not prospect, sorry, legend. What's his name? Linares, absolutely, and obviously there was a question mark there within that fight when he got rocked and he saw adversity, he came out on top. And I personally find that one of his, most entertaining fights where he did show a different side to himself, where he started giving it, he came out prosperous and again used his boxing skills, kept him moving, and if it works, you don't, if it's not broken, then you don't need to fix it, do you? So it's one of those things. If it's working, it's working. You don't need to come away and change for anyone, especially if it's gone and just won you 4 world titles. So, yeah.
When you discuss the rest of that division, and I know throughout the last year or so, these guys are all getting compared to the next Leonard, Hagler, Hearns, Duran era. We've not really replaced that era in boxing. These guys, a lot of people say that these crop of fighters can be the next Leonard, Hagler, Hearns, Duran era.
Yeah.
And the way he sort of performs, because obviously, for me, Ryan Garcia's biggest test was Luke Campbell. Had to climb off the canvas in round 2.
Yep.
We've not really seen Tank tested, but do you think these guys, the way Ryan Garcia fights and the way Tank fights and the endless speed of Lomachenko, do you think these guys will bring out a different fighter in Devin Haney?
Yeah, I think when you put it like that, I think definitely they might be able to bring out a different.
So I just wanted to disturb you because I honestly thought last night we'd get a different Devin Haney because of how Kambosos was against Teofimo Lopez. Because if you watch that fight back and forth, it was just endless.
Yeah.
Those two guys from minute 1 to the last second of the fight, they went at it. But we didn't see that last night. So does that not make you think that Haney's now sort of, if he can perform like that against a come-forward fighter like Kambosos, he'll do it with the rest of the division?
Yeah, and here's the thing that I mentioned earlier. If he's got those tools to keep it long and not get involved and make it work to his advantage, he's going to carry on doing so. And if he was able to do that against someone like George Kambosos, who was there, like you said, toe-to-toe with Teofimo the entire fight, and, they put on an amazing fight. If he was able to take away those tools from him, his arsenal away from him, and just, in other words, put on a masterclass, I don't see why he would change his game against anyone else. And rightfully so. It's just gone and won you 4 world titles. You're undisputed now. Why would you need to go away and change your game? So, again, hats off to him, and he put on an amazing fight.
Because obviously we found out last night after the fight that there is a rematch clause. Personally, wouldn't want to see a rematch, but you have to discuss what's next. Now the bad thing about boxing is you could have 4 different world champions in each weight category, but we're very fortunate to have one champion now in this weight category.
Yeah.
The fight I want to see next is Lomachenko. I mean, I know he had an off night against Teofimo Lopez. He come back and did what he had to do against Richard Comey. I still feel, for me, that he's the number 1 man in that division because of what he's achieved and because of how long he's been doing it for.
Yeah.
Is that the number 1 fight next for Devin Haney, or do you think this is the time when the Ryan Garcias and the Tank Davises need to now start to be getting into these world title fights?
Yeah, it's like what you said, prior to about the Duran era and the likes of the Leonard. So yeah, I think they all need to get in that mix up now because they're all equally talented. But listen, boxing's it's a business now, isn't it? Money talks, and it depends on who comes forward with what kind of contract and what the negotiations are going to be in terms of who takes on what in terms of the split of the fight and stuff. But yeah, you're absolutely right. I think those names are definitely some of the top names in boxing, and quite easily they could become the next 4, the next 5, or however many they are in terms of the next gen. So I definitely think they're all equipped. They all got the tools to put on amazing fights, and they should definitely get it on, man. There's no need to duck anyone or avoid anyone, because people, aside from doing it for money and building yourself a bit of cred, people want to do it for legacy. The likes of the Haneys and the Tanks, once they get up there, now that they won world titles, what's the reason for you to keep on going? The only reason that I could possibly see is it's legacy. You want to leave behind a legacy for people to remember your name, that we've never had a Tank again, or we've never had a Haney again, and so forth. And yeah, I definitely think they need to get into that mix and just start going out there and just start fighting each other, just call each other right and just get it cracking.
Ryan Garcia's next fight is, as it was announced last week, against Javier Fortuna. Not sure what's going on with Gervonta Tank Davis. Obviously, there's still question marks over his future, where he'll commit with Mayweather Promotions and the Leonard Ellerbys as well. But who is the number one man that potentially does take those belts off of Devin Haney? If you're looking at that division right now, who do you think the number one guy is?
Personally, for me, I think it'd be Tank. I just think that Tank is an all-round fighter. His fight last week, I don't know if you saw it against
Roland Romero. Yeah,
Roland Romero. Romero was saying that he exposed him and that
he got knocked out at the end of it.
Yeah, well, he was saying he exposed him, and leading up to getting knocked out, he was outboxing him and he was up on the cards and stuff. But I think that might have just been a part of Tank's plan. I think Tank knew what he was doing, and like he said, he walked into it and he used that to his advantage. They had heated press conferences and.
Pushed him off the stage.
Pushed him off the stage, and these mind games they all play a part, don't they? And he literally walked into it, and you see Tank stepping back, and hoping that he'd come in, and it just that money shot. It was a lovely left hand, and he just put him away. And for me personally, Tank's my favourite in that division, and I think Tank still quite easily takes all the things.
There's no doubt about it. He's a phenomenal fighter.
Yeah.
Even Ryan Garcia is a good fighter.
Yeah,
as well.
Of course, yeah, absolutely.
I got a lot of respect for Ryan Garcia, especially after how he climbed off the canvas to beat Luke Campbell. But with me, I just think these guys, and I don't want to diss them, but they're just more social media fighters these days. You want to see Ryan Garcia fighting a lot more than he has done recently. I don't know why the Garcia and Tank fight hasn't happened yet. I mean, I look at it, these guys, are sort of probably at number 3 and number 4 in that division when you've got Haney as number 1. Number 2 is Lomachenko. Probably number 3, that says Kambosos, and these two guys are at 4 and 5. That's a great fight to make, in my opinion, is Tank and Ryan Garcia. But obviously, they're both on sort of different paths now. I don't know why. But being Devin Haney right now, back to the Lomachenko point, we all know Lomachenko is probably the overall guy of the division because of what he's done in boxing. Great amateur background, world champion in different weights. Is that the fight Devin Haney should be targeting next? Thinking, do you know what? If I beat this guy, I can well and truly say, even though he's got all the belts, but if you beat Lomachenko, you can well and truly say, I've done it all now. I am the man in the division.
Yeah.
Would you not think that's the case?
Well, it's subjective, isn't it? It's a matter of down to opinion, to be honest. I think he's done it. I think he's done enough now just to get up there and get his name out there. So it's Lomachenko and these guys that should be after him, not the other way around. I don't think Haney needs to go out and start calling people out. Obviously, they need to be on his case now because, again, he is the man now, isn't he? So, I do agree with you. Lomachenko would definitely be another great name on the resume. And, Lomachenko is a wizard, isn't he? In terms of his skills, the guy's just phenomenal to watch, I definitely think it'd be a good fight. But in terms of whether that would go and build his legacy, and if he doesn't take that fight, people would say, oh, he avoided him. I don't really think that would be the case. But, as a boxing fan, we want the top 4 or 5 guys just to get it on and bring back that era of Duran and Hagler and so forth. And
it'd be
amazing. It'd be absolutely amazing. But again, it's a question of business. Does it make sense?
Doesn't make sense. Where's the money going? Who's the 8? I know exactly. See, that's why I'm glad I got you down here today because you sort of know like the ins and outs of the sport. Move on now. We'll talk a bit about an announcement that got made last week in the heavyweight division. No, it's not Joshua Usyk. No, it's not Fury and any of the big names. But it is a big heavyweight fight that got announced for July the 2nd between Hughie Fury and Michael Hunter. In the last few years, I think when you look at the heavyweight division, maybe we have been focused on the main faces of the division. You just had the big fight in Wembley between Fury and Dillian Whyte. We're sort of waiting for that announcement between Joshua and Usyk for their rematch. But, you look at it lately, apparently Ruiz and Ortiz is a fight as well that's supposedly done. You've still got some big names out there. Dubois got his fight with Trevor Bryan. Chisora Kownacki is a fight that's meant to be happening. I'm pretty sure this year we're getting Joyce versus Parker, but I'm excited for this fight. Hughie Fury and Michael Hunter, 2 good heavyweight fighters. Hughie Fury's had a few defeats in his career. Michael Hunter's not been as active as he should have been, but your thoughts on the fight itself?
To be honest with you, I haven't really ever kept up with Michael Hunter, but Hughie Fury, again, someone, that has been in the sport for quite a while now, and again he's time and time again tried to show why he belongs there in the heavyweight division. And I don't really know much about Michael Hunter, but any fight that Hughie Fury is in, obviously he tries to bring it, and he wants to be up there with the big names, doesn't he? So hopefully that fight gets made, and Fury comes out on top.
One of the things that I always say in boxing, that experience wins over anything. Now, he's lost 3 times in this heavyweight division. He lost his world title fight to Joseph Parker, which I thought was pretty hard done by. I had him winning that fight. He's lost to Kubrat Pulev, and he's lost to Alexander Povetkin. No shame in losing to those 3 fights.
All big names, aren't they?
He was young as well at the time.
Yeah.
But what that does for his experience is that any other big fight he gets himself into, i.e. this one, he's going to have that sort of experience now going into this fight.
Absolutely.
He's from a fighting family. He's managed by Peter Fury, who we all know took Tyson to his first world title, that masterclass performance against Vladimir Klitschko. But we said about the defeats he's had, but this surely now is probably the biggest fight of his career. This is the fight you can't afford to lose, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I agree. Like from what you're telling me about Hunter, if this is the next step up, and if this proves that he belongs in that division, then absolutely. If he wipes the floor with him, and then he can start looking at bigger things and start moving forward, and then start calling out the Joseph Parkers again, and maybe have Dillian Whyte even in the mix. So yeah, absolutely.
It's an exciting time for the up and coming heavyweights. That sort of next crop of fighters behind the likes of the Furies, the Joshua's, Usyks, and the Whites. As I mentioned, you got Daniel Dubois, who's going to be challenging for a WBA regular heavyweight title against Trevor Bryan. But there's a win on July the 2nd, sort of maybe elevate him to beyond British level, or do you think if he can get past Michael Hunter, he should be looking at the likes of the Daniel Dubois or the Dillian Whytes? Do you think these fights are still big fights for him?
Yeah, definitely. I think on a domestic level, it's not a case of whether you need to prove yourself to the rest of Britain or to the rest of the world like that. I think domestically, if you can clean up your domestic division, then there's no question marks around you. People won't turn around and say, "Oh, okay, well, hang on, should he really be stepping up to world level this soon? And does he deserve it?" and so forth. Whereas if you do take on the domestic fights and you clean those guys up, one, obviously, it kind of tells you who's the best in Britain. And number 2, from looking at it from a world perspective, then all of those question marks have been answered, haven't they? You've kind of walked through everyone, and you've done what you needed to get yourself there. Like, for example, Dillian Whyte, prime example, mandatory for 1,000 days. And, he earned his stripes, his credentials. He walked through a serious resume. Some of the guys that he put away was tremendous.
He's got one of the best CVs out there, hasn't he, Dillian Whyte?
Amazing. And, Dillian Whyte, prime example. Like, domestically, he literally obliterated through everyone. And coming from small old shows and getting on the big platform and really being able to push forward and push on and then get that world title fight against Tyson Fury, you got to give credit where credit is due.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean? And for some, I think a lot of people are happy that he didn't win that and that he got knocked out. Probably because he's a lone wolf and the guy just pushes on himself, doesn't he?
You can't have hatred towards Dillian Whyte. He's done so much for the sport. He's been around for so long, and he's fought the biggest and the best names.
Yeah.
And he's a warrior, man, and he'll come again.
Yeah.
When we talk about Michael Hunter as another American heavyweight, kind of like people have sort of moved away from the American heavyweights now since Deontay Wilder got dethroned by Tyson Fury.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts on the American heavyweight scene right now? Because Deontay Wilder supposedly said he's going to fight again, but when you go through 3 grueling fights like that, are you ever going to be the same fighter again? Maybe, maybe not.
Yeah.
But is this now the right time to have a new face from the American heavyweight division, given the fact that Jarrell Miller's sort of making a comeback now? People have their opinions of him, and rightfully so. But is this Michael Hunter's chance to say he is the guy from America to sort of represent the division in terms of an American fighter?
No, listen, like I said before, Michael Hunter, don't know a huge deal about him, but I wouldn't say if he gets through Hughie Fury, he can say that he's the man, because really and truly, how much of a challenge is it in comparison to some of the other big names in Britain, to say that you're the man from America? You got the likes of Andy Ruiz still. You got the Oscar Rivas and these other guys. So there is still a fair few names out there in the heavyweight division. But again, I think if you are able to come out on top, then you can definitely turn around and say that I am a candidate that can mix it up there with some of the greats and some of the top names. But I wouldn't say that by any means you can say that you are the man of the country. If you are still at that level, I think to get to that world level, it'd probably have to be the Dillian Whytes and again the Tyson Furies. Obviously, these guys have come away from boxing now. Tyson Fury is obviously retired now, isn't he? And we don't know if Deontay Wilder is gonna make a comeback. But yeah, I think I'd like to see Michael Hunter, as you're saying, if he was to go up against people like Andy Ruiz and again have a convincing win over him, then you could turn around and say, yeah, there's not really much of a people that I need to get through, and then that my name's definitely up there, with the rest of the greats or the rest of the people out there that are within that same division. So yeah.
Obviously, that's that's a very good point you made there. I mean, a win against Hughie Fury does do him a lot of good, but there are still big names out there that he's going to have to go through if he does want to get to a world title shot. Just before we speak about you, and we discuss one more topic quickly, because I know I haven't got much of your time, unfortunately. You're a very busy man. No, don't be silly. There's a rumour, apparently we're going to get the undisputed fight at 147 between Errol Spence and Terence Crawford just after the summer. Do you believe now that finally it's going to happen?
Yeah, I think it might do. I don't think there's much more for both of them to do, to be honest. As you've seen, they've literally obliterated everyone, haven't they? And there's not much more that anyone else can really offer them. And if the fight doesn't get made, I'd be really disappointed. Cause
I'm sure you'd be ready to maybe go down a couple of weights, right?
But yeah, that's definitely, I think, the ultimate fight. As you mentioned right at the beginning of the podcast, that's something that I think everyone would be tuning in on. That Mayweather and Pacquiao after all the years. I'm
going to put you right on the spot now. Yeah. Who wins that fight? Because I've been debating about it since I've heard that it's likely to happen after the summer. So you got to give us an answer. Who wins?
Okay, they're both in their own right amazing boxers.
They're credit to the sport, aren't they?
They definitely are credit to the sport, and I'm a fan of both of them. But for me, I personally think Crawford pinches it.
Is it because of how he's sort of like climbed up division after division, and he's... I'm not saying Spence hasn't been in big fights, because he has. I was there when he won the world title in Sheffield.
Yeah.
But it's because he's done it time and time. Is that why he's sort of slightly given the edge over Spence?
Yeah, definitely. That, and also in terms of...
Because if you said he was a better fighter than Spence, then it's just a bit of a harsh comment to make.
It's a very harsh comment to make, to be honest. And it's one of those things that, you can't really pick sides unless, you're really involved in the sport and you just kind of go with your gut sort of thing. But for me, personally, I think Terence might just have that skill level ever so slightly over him. It might just be a bit more technically able than him. But other than that, like if Spence, if he wins it, I wouldn't be surprised. It's
going to be a great fight. Do you know what? I know we've got Canelo Golovkin free happening this year. I know we're going to get Joshua. For me, this is the biggest fight of the year. Yeah. Probably the biggest fight. Maybe one of the biggest fights in this decade so far. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely, yeah.
Again, I know we're short for time, but congratulations to you. Went 5-0 last Saturday night. I couldn't be there because, unfortunately, I had to watch Liverpool lose the Champions League final. But from what I've gathered on social media, very tough fight. Good opponent turned up. I was there when you went 4-0, though. Astonishing knockout. But again, experience, more rounds under your belt.
Absolutely, yeah.
You've been quite active lately. Happy with the performance and the progression?
I got given news about the fight being confirmed 5 weeks prior to the actual fight date. So again, 5 weeks is a long enough time for anyone to go in and have a 6-round fight. But for myself, I was observing Ramadan, and then during Ramadan, I felt quite poorly. I was a bit unwell, so I couldn't train for about a week and a half. So literally from Eid day, I started training, and I had a solid 3.5 weeks where I was flat out. I was literally training every single day. Probably took like 3 rest days in the 3.5 weeks. And no excuses. I turned up and I done what I had to in terms of making sure I get that win. Of course, I know a lot of my fans that turned up, they were expecting another knockout. But for me, the ultimate goal is to make sure I get that W. The opponent that turned up, Dean Wilkinson, he's been on Frank Warren shows prior to fighting me. He's very, very active. I think he fights like 2 or 3 times in a month, as these guys do. And he definitely turned up. He definitely gave me a lot of things to think about, and again, like you said, it was more so for the experience. I was actually thinking of just doing another 4-rounder, but my coach insisted that we go for the 6-rounder and have something different to add, because if I went in there and blew him out of there within the first round, the second round, really and truly, I don't think I would have gained or learned much from that fight, because he was a game opponent that that came to really press and came to win. He taught me a lot more I could ever imagine in terms of like what I could gain from a journeyman. So in terms of experience, it was really really good. It was a tough fight. In the first 3 rounds, I was very comfortable, but I'd won by a landslide within the first 3 rounds. In the fourth round, I got caught with a good shot, and it rattled me. So it was the first time ever in my life that I'd been rattled. But literally a few seconds later, I'd recovered, and I was firing back because I knew straight away that that the guys got the edge over me probably within that round, and then come out the following 2 rounds and win convincingly. Of course, if the opening came of where I could have knocked him out, then yes, I would have. But for me, more than anything else, it was a case of, okay, it's a 6-round fight. Am I going to be able to last the 6 rounds? Because you've seen it before with some of these names. They've gone in for a 6-round fight or an 8-round fight.
So often they just
and some of these prospects, they're blowing some of these guys out of there within the first 2 or 3 rounds. So when they are tested within the 8-round fights, it's a case of, okay, the last 2 rounds you see them fade, and I don't want to be at that stage of of seeing myself fade. I wanted to know where I am. If I get taken to deep waters, how would I be? Of course, it's still early in my career. I wouldn't really say it's deep waters, but it's a case of, okay, I've done the 6 rounds now. I've got the experience of 6 rounds underneath my belt. I know how to pace myself. My coach came away from that, that performance, and he was really happy that I was consistent in terms of my stamina and my skill level throughout all 6 rounds. It's one of those things that we're learning on the job. And I never had a huge amateur background. I had 20-odd fights, and I won, I think, 12 fights at the time. And I'd never ever been in a fight that was, like I said, about Yusuf Kamari prior to this. I'd never been in a fight that wasn't entertaining. I always turned up to fight. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't.
I still remember when we used to go to mosque together and we used to go play football. I never thought you'd become a boxer. I have so much respect to you, man, because you were never a big kid.
Yeah.
You was always kind of like myself.
Yeah.
And then when I see you, I find out you're into boxing and you're turning pro, I was like, you know what? Hats off to the geezer. And I know you've had a tough time lately.
Yeah, of course.
But you've carried on. You've kept on going. The pandemic, family issues.
Yeah.
How are you mentally still doing it?
To be honest with you, it's my parents' prayers and the support that I have of the people that are around me. Because there's been many times, that I've wanted to just pack it all up, because I'm 26 years old now. I stopped my amateur career at the age of 20 because, as you know, I lost my father at that time, and there was greater responsibilities at home. And then I always had that passion and that love for boxing. And I always wanted to come back to boxing, and I wanted to go and win tournaments and go and really get my name out there. And domestically, in terms of in my town and within the Bedfordshire region, I had a decent name in the amateur background. But it was a case of what was more important at the time. And for me, of course, it was family. So when I got myself back into it, I thought, I'd probably go back and have a few more amateur fights and going into these tournaments. But I was approached by a local manager and a local promoter, and they came to me and they said that, look, we want you to turn over. You're a fan favorite. You always come to fight. You've got that skill level and that bravery behind you, where we think you're going to be in really entertaining fights. And there's not much happening in the amateur scene. I don't know whether they'd even predicted anything about COVID or anything like that, because COVID, I think, held a lot of the amateur boxing.
Yeah, it did.
So so I turned over, and just perseverance and just trying to push on. And of course, as you know, I lost my mother during the pandemic, and for me now, we want to carry on with life, and it's one of those things where people live to try and please their parents. I don't think that there's anyone out there that's around me that can say any different. Of course, people, they want to live for themselves, but more than anything else, they want to achieve success, and they want to do great in life to make their parents proud.
100%.
And just because my ones are no longer here doesn't mean I can't make them proud. Do you know what I mean? It's more so of a reason for me to do it for them, in their remembrance. But at the same time, I've got a 10-month-old daughter. I want to make her, alhamdulillah. So I want to make her proud. And the people that are around me, people like yourself, you're there to support me in the times that I want to back it up. I mean, I'm not a bad looking bloke. I've got a half decent job. I came out with the first class honours degree in accounting and finance. I'm a finance analyst by profession, working for TUI. I do that alongside doing my professional boxing. So my 9 to 5 is obviously as an analyst, and then I do boxing as well as the analyst job. But it's a case of we're still building. I'm 26. I'm trying to give myself another 10 years to really push on and see where we can get in terms of the boxing scene. And, I don't want to speak too soon, but it's one of those things. I'm developing each fight. I'm seeing myself getting better each fight. I'm learning on the job. I'm going away and I'm meeting all of these great individuals and these great people that are just pushing me and telling me to, you know what?
Yeah, they're sparring with Dillian Whyte a few months ago.
Yeah. I was out in Portugal and in the Dillian Whyte camp. It was really good. He had a good few boys for me to move around and get a few rounds in with, basically. And then when I'd come back, obviously, I'd got that knockout. So it's one of those things that, again, when you're going out there and getting these kind of exposures.
What's he like? Being the day-to-day, not as a fighter, but as a person. I've met him a couple of times, but it's briefly.
As a person, the first time I'd met him, I'd actually first met him at Neasden at IQ Boxing Boxing Club, and he was really humble. I asked him for a picture straight away, because obviously, for what he's done for the sport and in terms of how he started off in the small hall shows. And again, he doesn't have a massive amateur pedigree behind him. He came away from kickboxing, and obviously we know about the win that he got over Anthony Joshua in the amateurs. But again, similar to myself, I could kind of relate to him that he hasn't got a huge pedigree behind him, and he's come in and he's hit the scene, and he's hit the scene hard. He's made his trademark within the sport of boxing. But as a person, he's hilarious, man. He's full of banter.
You can just tell.
He's full of banter. He'd seen me out in Portugal and he'd recognised me straight away because he'd seen me in Neasden prior to that. And man, he's a nice guy. He's a good person to be around. His team's very friendly. Also, again, they have that banter, that open banter. So if you can't take banter, I don't think those guys are your cup of tea. But of course, it was a lot of back and forth and stuff. And
you gave as good as you got.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it's one of those things. You can't be seen as the weak individual amongst the predators as such. Yes. So you got to give it back, man. You got to give it back, even if you are the small guy in the stable.
It's not a sport for the weak.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, absolutely.
You said that maybe hopefully 10 years left in the game.
Yep.
But I'm pretty sure that before you signed up to become a pro boxer, you had an overall target in your mindset.
Yep.
When you walk away from the sport, what is the minimum you want to achieve in the sport? The
minimum, in terms of titles, I'd say the minimum would be at British level. To say that a welterweight or a super welterweight, that was again a good prospect that came up again from not a huge amateur background, and I managed to do well. So get to that British level as a minimum, and of course, like every boxer aspires. That gets to that stage to then become world champion. But yeah, as a minimum, I'd definitely say British level.
I saw Paul Webb saying that they should do a boxer tournament for your weight category, and he was saying that you'd 100% be up for it. That's an opportunity you've got to be banking on, surely, right?
Absolutely. And I've had this discussion with a lot of people, and they've said there's probably a lot more risk than there is reward to it because, of course, you've seen it yourself. There's bombs from left, right, and centre. Those guys, they're literally putting their lives on the line. Not to say that you wouldn't do that in a normal fight anyway, but when you're
got
turning
three rounds,
and you're super intense, it's bringing back the entire amateur side of things again. But the only difference is you're sitting down on your shots a lot more. You're a lot more calculated. With the amateurs, I think it's very fast-paced and very aggressive, whereas in the pros, you're loading up on the shots, and it just takes one punch to change your entire life.
And not to forget, you got thousands of people watching on stuff like Sky Sports as well.
Absolutely, and you know what? No one would want to walk away. I wouldn't say embarrassed because
it
takes great courage to get in there in the first place. You know what I mean? But that would definitely be an opportunity that I'd be willing to take up.
Well, listen, inshallah, hopefully the big opportunities are coming your way. Ali, I can't keep you any longer because I know you've got a busy schedule. So thank you very much for jumping on.
Thank you so much for having me, Faisal. I appreciate it.
It's a pleasure as always. Hopefully you're free for football next Friday. Guys, that's it for today's podcast. Again, please make sure you give Ali Malik a follow on social media. We'll be sharing the links below in the description. Hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell for further notifications, and give us a follow on all the social media platforms as well. Check us out on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and TikTok. Ali, once again, bro, thank you very much for joining, and thank you for watching podcast 54 of the Lights Out Boxing podcast.